Welcome to the Athlete Brand Advisor Podcast, featuring advice and interviews about athlete branding. Learn how marketing, public relations, and broadcasting can grow your brand. We also have special episodes to talk about recent news, events, and anything in the world of sports. The podcast is sponsored by Pliable, a versatile marketing, PR, and broadcasting company that identifies opportunities and creates tailored content for its clients. Now it's time to roll. Here's your host, Greg Glenn.
Thanks and welcome to the Athlete Brand Advisor Podcast. If you're looking for insights and advice on athlete branding, you're in the right place. In this episode, we're talking about advice for athletes and broadcasters and what it takes to make it up into the broadcasting booth. Today's guest is Emma Tiedemann, Director of Broadcasting for the Portland Sea Dogs. Emma joined the Sea Dogs in March of 2020, becoming just the fifth broadcaster in Sea Dogs history. She spent the previous 2 seasons as the Director of Broadcasting and Media Relations for the Lexington Legends, where she called back-to-back South Atlantic League championships. In 2019, she was honored as the South Atlantic League Media Relations Director of the Year. If you haven't had a chance to listen to a Sea Dogs game, you've got to hear Emma on the radio. She is fantastic. She's also our guest. Emma, welcome to the Athlete Brand Advisor Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Excellent, Emma. And one of the things that, really stuck out to me when you became the broadcaster for the Portland Sea Dogs was obviously the great history of broadcasters that have been in the Portland area, right? I mean, we think about everything going back from the Portland Pirates days, and Tom Caron, who's been a broadcaster there. You think about Mike Antonellis, obviously, who was before you, and just some of the great history here in Portland. Talk to me about what it meant to you to become the broadcaster.
Honestly, I'm still kind of in shock that I'm sitting up here today because, when I saw that the Sea Dogs position became open, I thought that my friend was, joking with me because in the industry, we knew how fantastic of a franchise the Sea Dogs are, and the fact that this position really never opens up. Like you said, only the fifth broadcaster of, they're now 29 years. So it was a surprise. And then I, decided I couldn't pass this opportunity up. I would kick myself if I didn't at least apply for it. And everything went well. And here I am today. So it's a great honor to know that history and, to now be the voice of the Sea Dogs.
Absolutely. And as you come here to Portland, obviously with great experience, I always enjoy talking with athletes. When I talk with them, I always ask them growing up, who was your favorite athlete and why? And I'd love to hear yours.
Well, I grew up in Dallas, Texas, so mine is Texas related. But it was actually the duo. It was the pair of Adrian Beltre and Elvis Andrews. It was kind of, it was a great pair of Beltre, a fantastic, experienced athlete who was just fun to watch. And then you have Elvis Andrews, who he was a shortstop. And those two just made watching baseball fun because as we all know, baseball can be slow to some people and that sort of thing. So I think as I was growing to love the game of baseball more and more, it was really fun to watch those two on the field and just obviously loving what they did every single day and seeing that passion. It was really cool to see as a Texas Ranger fan and got me through some tough Rangers seasons. So made it better.
Absolutely. I've even heard, I've had one broadcaster tell me Ozzie Smith was one of his favorites because, again, when you have someone that creates excitement and energy in a sport like baseball, where, like you said, 9 innings can be long. And I've been in those games where you're broadcasting 11-1 scores and it's the bottom of the 8th and you're like, is this thing going to ever end? And it does help to have athletes out there that are entertaining and that have a story behind them. And I think that's really important. One of the other things that I think about when I talk to broadcasters too is who has been a mentor or maybe impacted your career the most?
I think it's quite a few people. I think the one that's impacted me the most is definitely my grandfather. He's the one who got me into broadcasting, and he is now, probably my biggest mentor and biggest cheerleader that I have right now. And will send me tape or send me critiques after every single game. He listens to whatever sport. I called hockey for the first time over the weekend, and he listened to the whole thing. He never has called a hockey game, but he still gave me a little bit of feedback as best he knew. But yeah, I think hands down, he's been the most important person, because without him, I wouldn't be here today. And then, I think that other big league broadcasters like Susan Waldman with the Yankees, she's been tremendous, always just a text message away. And then Eric Nadel of the Texas Rangers, he put me in contact with Susan and is quietly becoming a big proponent of women in broadcasting. He quietly will talk to all of us and that sort of thing. So those are my three most important, probably.
Well, that's great to hear. I've also had people that have helped me along the way. And a lot of times, as we know in this business, it's not necessarily what you know, it's who you know. And it takes both in my mind, because you don't get into the position you're in without obviously the experience and the talent, but also the people that believe in you along the way. And I think it's great to hear that. And I had a feeling that Susan Waldman would certainly be in that list because she has had such an influence, especially in the baseball world. I'm curious, talking about hockey. I'm a hockey guy. What hockey were you doing?
I was doing UNE women's hockey.
Oh, excellent. Great. Did they win?
It was a tie.
Oh, okay.
It was 2-2,
all right.
but it was exciting. They were down 2-0, started the third period, and they tied it up with about 2 minutes left. And then nothing happened in overtime, but it was still fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Now that's an interesting thing too, that I also think about when I think about my broadcasting career, is when I was at Quinnipiac University, I had the opportunity to broadcast a lot of sports. And I was like, I'm just going to broadcast whatever I can get my hands on, because I knew that more time behind the microphone was just going to be better in general. I'll make mistakes. That's fine. I'll learn from them. I'll learn from them now. I'd rather learn now than later. And is that kind of the philosophy you've had as well? It sounds like you're starting to branch out, and it kind of makes you appreciate the sport you're best at when you do other sports, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, my grandfather, when I was younger, always said, never say no. If you have an opportunity to do something, never say no, just go out and do it. And if you have to fake it till you make it, basically. And so that's how I sort of branched out and did football for the first time when I was in college. And I was scared to death, even though I knew the game of football pretty well. Right. It was intimidating at the time. I was at a Big 12 school that transitioned to SEC at the University of Missouri. So I got to do both Big 12 and SEC games, and then was chosen for the Cotton Bowl and called the Cotton Bowl as well. So you never really know where those opportunities really will lead you, even though you might be terrified and scared in the moment. It might pay off dividends down the road too. So I had just never been able to call a hockey game because I've never really lived in a quote unquote hockey territory before. But it's always been on my list. So now I can check it off and hopefully call more games in the future.
Oh, that's great. I enjoy hearing that. It's a good story. And then let's talk about some of the ways that you think, certainly during this pandemic, right? We've seen this with broadcasting, that I think a lot more people expect more of a broadcast now, because in the past, it used to be radio was cool, like that was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Now we've got all this live streaming. Now with the pandemic, people are like, is the game online? Is it going to be streamed? Is it on some Facebook page? Is it on YouTube? Like, there's so much more access to games, and for broadcasters, really, if you think about it, to be doing more games. And I think that's really kind of created a unique opportunity for broadcasters. Have you felt the growth of broadcasting and seen it in your world as well?
Definitely. I think that I've seen more kind of companies come out. I have a lot of friends that are working for like Flow Sports and that sort of thing. So I think that with the shift, from maybe the traditional TV style to showing off these D2, D3 schools on a website service, I think that it helps grow not only whatever sport they're, the sport in the school itself, but really the broadcaster, because it gives us opportunities to really hone our skills. And then, you never know who you could tune into if you're watching a D3, hockey game and you have somebody on there that really could be either a great broadcaster in the future, or you're listening to him and they're like, hey, this person might take off pretty soon. So I think it's a unique opportunity for both the broadcasters and then also the listeners and the fans of the sport.
Absolutely. I agree with you completely. And it's a great opportunity for these schools too. We talk a lot with athletes and schools about branding and how it helps not only the athlete when, the games are on or available. It helps the school. You take a facility like UNE that has a great facility and someone sees that for the first time and says, oh, UNE, that looks pretty cool down there, and then they start looking at the school and more like that. Let's talk about athlete branding a little bit in the sense that, you've talked about some of the players you watched growing up. From an athlete branding perspective, talk to me as a broadcaster about what makes players appealing to you, or the story behind a player, and how that really compels people to like or want to follow that player. Have you seen examples maybe over the recent years in your broadcasting of somebody that had a great athlete brand and that kind of really stuck out to you as a great interview and somebody you'd always want to talk to because they just always had that personality?
Definitely. I mean, there's always multiple personalities on teams every year. I think most recently, Ryan Fitzgerald, who was with the Sea Dogs and with Worcester in 2021, he sticks out because he has a fantastic story of, he went undrafted, went and played indie ball, was signed by the Red Sox, and really took off this last season. But aside from all of that, the numbers and the stats that you can look at too, he had the mullet, had the best walk-up song that, sitting up here, you can see down and see all the fans. And every time he'd come to the plate with his walk-up song, everyone was, bopping their heads. And he just had that kind of presence every time he walked to the plate. And on top of that, you could tell exactly where he was in the field because of his mullet. So you, as a fan, you could easily notice that, yes, he was our shortstop, but all of a sudden he's playing first base. Now he's in the outfield. And, he is very versatile in that sense too. And so I think that he kind of saw that, and he's posting more about his cleats and his mullet and the hairstyle and stuff on Instagram. So I think he's kind of leaning into it now a little bit more, but definitely one of those guys that, just loves the game of baseball and is here to win every day.
Oh, that's a really cool story. I like that. And sounds like a great guy that would be interested in certainly growing their athlete brand, because as I talk with athletes, especially in minor league sports, you're trying to create this persona and you're building your reputation. It's your resume, if you will, as people are going to be looking at you, they're going to be watching you. And if you can stand out in some way, in addition to your skills, that makes you much more attractive. So it's great to hear that type of story. When we think about the pandemic, I wanted to talk with you about kind of how that's impacted things in your world, Emma, knowing that, it obviously has impacted the sport of baseball. It's impacted, some of the ways that we broadcast games, wearing masks or not wearing masks. How has the pandemic in kind of impacted your career, or what have you seen here over the last, 2 years of how it's maybe changed something good or bad?
Well, my experience with the pandemic was a little bit unique because I did move up here in March of 2020, and it was not the ideal time to make the move with the pandemic. I was driving up and stopped in Hartford and was listening to the radio, and they're like, oh, well, this NBA game just stopped in the middle of the game. And it didn't really click to me of how bad this pandemic could be until I got to Portland. And on my first day, it was our all staff meeting at 8:45, and we're all standing socially distanced. And our president introduces me and then says, we've been watching this on the CDC and keeping tabs on what's going on, and I think we need to work from home for the foreseeable future. So I was sent home on my first day.
First day.
Yeah. And so first day in a new city, new state. Honestly, I'd never really been to Maine before, so I was completely by myself. And then our season was canceled. And so it was a lot to take in 2020. A lot of people had it worse than just that. So I can't complain too much because I still had a job, and, our owners were phenomenal and kept us all on full time with our benefits. So that was great. But then, we did see in 2021, especially at the beginning, a lot of the kind of new rules of social distancing with the players. We couldn't go on the field, or we couldn't actually really go within 6 feet of the field for the first couple of weeks. And then we were able to go on the field still with our masks on. I missed a couple of road trips because I wasn't allowed on the bus. And so that was a little bit different, carrying the home broadcast in our radio studio. And I was there every night producing and still hosting the pre and post game shows. Yep. And then, I think long-term changes, I think all that is going to kind of fade away. I mean, by the end of the season, I was traveling, everything was normal. I think that it all depends on how this Omicron stuff goes and how things will look come late March and early April. But, I think that those indoor stadiums, I called the hockey game with a mask on right. The other day because UNE has mask requirements. So I think it'll depend on indoor outdoor situation if you're calling a game outside or even in a booth by yourself. I think we'll be okay without the mask, but I think inside it'll be up to the different venues on that sort of thing. But other than that, I think everything else is almost back to normal.
I'm sure you're looking forward to the season. That's for sure. I know Chris Cameron very well, who obviously is a big, long time person over there at the Sea Dogs, has a huge impact on the communications department and has done a great job. And I know every year he's always excited to get to first pitch. I know you're probably excited to get to first pitch. Talk to me about the team this year. What can we expect?
Well, the big news is we have a new manager this year, Chad Everson. He was the catching coordinator for the Red Sox for the last 12 years. So he's transitioning back into managing. So he'll be at the helm this year. We'll also have the first female coach in Sea Dogs history with Katie Krall. She's in a new role that every Red Sox affiliate is adding to the coaching staff as a development coach. So looking at more analytics and more stats and communicating that all to the Red Sox front office, which is really cool. And then from the player standpoint, we can only guess who we will have because we don't have the rosters quite yet. But looking at the Red Sox farm system and some top performers in Greenville and Salem last year, I think we should see a lot of home runs and maybe a chance at the playoffs again. We have a lot of talent and a lot of top prospects coming up.
Awesome. Like to hear that. And as you get ready for the season, one thing I wanted to touch on here, especially for athletes that are getting interested, in broadcasting or their end of their career, or maybe they're quite honestly a minor league player that's injured and they have an opportunity to maybe come up in the broadcast booth or do an interview or, be part of the broadcast in some way. What a great opportunity that is for athletes. And I know as a broadcaster, I enjoy having a color commentator that obviously is on the team or has played for the team or has experience. Talk to me about the opportunity that, these athletes have to come up in the broadcast booth. That's probably something you'd welcome. And it's also a great opportunity, like you were saying before, when we as broadcasters get to broadcast a lot of different sports. If you're a player that can go up in the booth and get a little taste, you may say, wow, this is something I'm actually interested as a future career.
Absolutely. When I was working in Oregon for a baseball team, we had the pitcher come on, starting pitcher who was interested in broadcasting. He'd come off on his off days and hang out with me and broadcast for a couple innings. And, he wanted to be a broadcaster. And I think that, any play-by-play person would welcome that kind of insight because, most of us, not all, but most play-by-play broadcasters haven't actually played the game that they're broadcasting or at least at a professional level. So when we can have that insight into exactly what's going on in the field or that different perspective or, all right, well, why do we put a bunt down in that situation? Different things like that, to have that extra person go, well, actually, this is why, or, say, well, his curveball isn't snapping off as well. This is why he moved his finger like the centimeter to the right or something like that. Yeah. I love all of that stuff. And sometimes out of all the research I do, sometimes that doesn't come up. So, whenever I can have somebody there that can, sprinkle in that color and analysis, I mean, it's perfect. And it makes a fantastic cohesive broadcast, in my opinion.
Yep, I agree with you completely. It really does make it special. And I think the listeners really appreciate that insight. And I think it's a great opportunity you were talking about earlier for, broadcasters to get their chance. This is a great chance for, athletes to get their chance to come up in the booth. And I've heard from a lot of broadcasters that welcome it. And so if you're an athlete listening and, you're injured or, you're going through a rough stretch or you're trying to figure out your way after retirement, please encourage you to reach out to broadcasters or teams in your area. I'm sure they'd be more than happy to have you come on. So let's talk about here as we finish up. I would love to have people be able to get in touch with you and learn more kind of about your career, Emma. Talk to me about where people can get in touch with you.
I guess social media is the best way. I think that's what we're all kind of doing these days. Instagram and Twitter are probably the ones I'm the most active on. And it's the same handle, just at Emma Tiedemann. And I typically will respond. I don't get notifications, so I'm not immediate response, but that's where you can find me.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate your time. And again, thank you very much for being on the podcast. Thanks for all you do for the Sea Dogs and making minor league baseball special here in Portland. You guys do a fantastic job.
Thanks for listening to the Athlete Brand Advisor Podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes from today's episode and catch up on recent episodes at pliablemarketing.com. We also encourage you to share topics and guest ideas by emailing our production staff at pliablemarketing@gmail.com. We love hearing from our loyal listeners and athletes who want to grow their brand. So jump in and be part of the podcast, because that's how we roll.